The wind came howling down from the trees that bordered the Hayes family farm, dragging with it the scent of swamp moss and something sharper, like rusted iron. Charlie Hayes sat upright in bed, heart pounding against his rib cage. Rain slammed the tin roof above him like fists, and thunder rolled so loud the floorboards trembled. But it wasn't the storm that woke him. It was the whisper. It came from the barn. He couldn't make out the words, not exactly, but there was rhythm to them, like someone praying through clenched teeth. His skin prickled as if 1,000 insects scurried beneath it. He pressed his ear to the cold glass of the window. The barn stood silent in the distance, squat and black against the lightning-lit sky. Then it came again, whispering soft and wet, seeping through the glass like breath. Charlie stumbled backward from the window, panting, trying to convince himself it was the wind. Just the wind. But something in his bones told him it wasn't. Before we unravel Grandpa Willis's secrets, don't forget to subscribe for more chilling true tales like this one. You won't want to miss what's buried deep in the soil of the Mississippi Delta. Charlie had only been in Mississippi a week. He arrived after the fire took his parents, with nothing but a satchel and his mother's journal. His grandmother's letter had been brief. "Come home, child, we'll keep you safe now." He hadn't seen her in over a decade. The man waiting beside her when he stepped off the train platform wasn't welcoming. Grandpa Willis looked like stone shaped into man, broad, expressionless, with deep-set eyes that never blinked long enough to show kindness. Their farm sat 5 miles outside a dying town called Belmont Hollow. Cotton fields stretched in all directions, bordered by dark forests thick with cypress and oak. Charlie had asked about the barn on his first day. "You don't go in there," his grandfather said without looking up from his whittling knife. "Why not?" "Because I said." That was the end of that. Now, the whispers from the barn made Charlie wonder what lay beyond those splintered boards and rusted hinges. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, he helped with the chores. The sun burned the morning fog off the fields as he fed the chickens and milked the cow. No one spoke much. Grandma Lucille hummed old hymns in the kitchen. Grandpa Willis sat on the porch, smoking a pipe, staring toward the barn like it might move on its own. After breakfast, Charlie wandered toward the edge of the fields. The barn loomed nearby, its paint peeled and doors chained shut. A crow perched on the weather vane, cawing once before flying off into the trees. "Boy!" Grandpa's voice cracked like a whip. "You hard of hearing?" Charlie turned. His grandfather stood at the porch edge, eyes locked on him. There was a silence between them, thick and pulsing. "Stay out of there." Charlie nodded and walked away. Later that afternoon, a visiting neighbor named Rufus stopped by, delivering eggs and stories. He was lean, wiry, and smelled faintly of kerosene. He tipped his hat to Lucille and sat on the porch steps, chewing tobacco and glancing sideways at the barn. "You got the boy sleeping in the back room?" Rufus asked. Lucille nodded. "Safer that way." Rufus spat brown juice into the dirt. "You ever think maybe it's time you tore that place down?" Willis said nothing, just stared out at the barn with his jaw tight. "What's in there?" Charlie asked quietly. Rufus chuckled, but not kindly. "Depends who you ask. Some say it's just old tools. Others say Willis buried things best left forgotten." "Like what?" Rufus met his gaze. "You ever hear Bones sing?" Charlie shook his head. "Pray you never do." That night Charlie lay awake again, heart thumping in the quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the air thick and wet. The crickets had stopped singing. Not even the frogs dared croak. Silence pressed down on the house. And then the whispers came back. Clearer now. He rose, careful not to wake the creaky floorboards. Outside, the barn stood like a shadow cast by the moonlight. He crept toward it, the mud cold beneath his feet. Each step brought the voices sharper, louder and stranger, like laughter twisted into mourning. Just before he reached the door, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. Willis stood behind him. "Boy," he said, voice low and shaking, "if you value your soul, you turn round right now." Charlie tried to speak, but nothing came. His grandfather's eyes were not cruel now, nor angry. They were filled with something worse, fear. "Some things," Willis said, voice like gravel. ain't meant to be known. And he walked back to the house, leaving Charlie alone with the barn and its whispers, still calling his name. The sun rose hot and mean over the Mississippi fields, drawing steam from the wet earth and sweat from every man's brow. Charlie worked beside his grandfather that morning, hoeing rows of collard greens in silence. Each swing of the blade was a rhythm, cut, pull, step. Willis didn't speak, and Charlie didn't dare break the hush between them. But his mind was a storm. He couldn't shake the whispers from the night before, nor the fear in Willis's voice. Fear, not anger. That was what had rooted Charlie in place. His grandfather, who never flinched at thunder or snakes, had looked haunted. Charlie stole glances at him under the brim of his hat. Willis's skin was like leather, sun-cracked and tough. His hands were thick, knotted from decades of work, but there was something else beneath the surface, something rigid, coiled tight like wire. They broke at midday. Willis sat on the porch sharpening a blade, eyes narrow, movements precise. Charlie lingered by the pump, washing the dirt from his hands until he worked up the nerve. "You fought in the war, right?" Willis didn't look up. "That's right." "Which side?" Willis paused, then resumed the grinding. "There weren't no good side." Charlie waited. The silence stretched long and thin. "You see things?" he asked quietly. This time Willis looked at him. "I saw men broken in half by cannon fire. I saw boys cry for mothers who'd already died. I saw preachers slit throats like it was gospel." He stood, wiped the blade on his pant leg and turned toward the barn. "But nothing from that war haunts me like what's on this land." Charlie didn't follow. Later, after supper, he sat with his grandmother on the back porch. Lucille rocked slowly, eyes half closed, hands folded over her apron. "Tell me about Grandpa," Charlie said. Her eyes opened, cloudy and pale but sharp beneath the fog. "What you want to know? Why's he afraid of the barn?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the tree line where the cypress loomed. "Your grandpa came back from the war changed, not just by what he saw, by what followed him." Charlie frowned. "Followed him?" Lucille nodded once. "Some things, they don't stay on battlefields. Some things cling to you like smoke, like hunger." Charlie leaned forward. "But what is it?" "Something he found near Vicksburg. Said it was a cave half buried in the hills. Said he went inside on a dare. Only one came out." Her voice was steady, like she was telling him how to make biscuits, but Charlie felt cold all over. "What was in the cave?" "I don't know, but he never walked right after. Started waking up screaming, speaking words that weren't English, burned his Bible, buried his medals." She touched her chest lightly. "Judith tried to help him. She believed there was still good in him." Charlie's breath caught. "My mom?" Lucille nodded. "She loved him even when he scared her. But when she turned 16, she started asking too many questions. Started looking where she shouldn't." A gust of wind stirred the porch screen. Somewhere a dog barked once and fell silent. "Next thing we knew, she ran off to Chicago, sent a letter every now and then but never came back. I reckon the fire that took her was just the last part of him catching up." Charlie swallowed hard. His chest ached like he'd swallowed a stone. "Did he ever talk about it?" "What he saw in the cave?" Lucille shook her head. "No, but every year on the same night he goes out to that barn with a lantern and stays till dawn. Comes back looking older." Charlie looked toward the barn, now just a silhouette in the dusk. "Why doesn't he just burn it down?" Her voice lowered to a whisper. "Because what's inside won't let him." That night, Charlie couldn't sleep. The air in his room felt heavy, pressed close like a blanket soaked in river water. He tossed and turned, then rose and tiptoed through the hall. The back door creaked open under his hand. From the porch, he saw Willis crossing the yard. He held a lantern in one hand and a long iron rod in the other. His steps were slow, deliberate, like he was heading into battle. Charlie followed from a distance, hiding behind the chicken coop. Willis stopped at the barn doors, unhooked the chain and slipped inside. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then light flickered through the slats. Shadows moved, too many to belong to one man. Shapes twisted, long and wrong. A low hum rose, vibrating through the ground. Charlie backed away, terrified. As he turned to run, a word slipped through the barn's cracks. Not English, and not meant for living ears. The morning after the barn ritual, Charlie sat at the edge of the porch, gripping the hem of his shirt with white knuckles. The sun had barely lifted over the horizon, but sweat already dotted his brow. The memory of those voices, twisting, hollow, not quite human, echoed in his ears like a curse that refused to fade. He hadn't seen Willis come back to the house. The barn looked unchanged, still slumped and silent. But Charlie knew something had happened inside, something wrong. The air around it felt bruised. By mid-morning, his curiosity overcame his fear. While Willis was down by the creek fixing a busted fence, Charlie crept toward the barn again. He didn't dare go inside. Not yet. Instead, he circled around to the back, where the boards were loose and swollen from years of rain. There, half covered by brambles, he saw it. A patch of soil darker than the rest. He knelt, brushing aside the vines, and found claw marks, deep grooves in the dirt as if something had been dragged there recently. He touched the soil. Damp, loose, freshly disturbed. He returned to the house with the image burned into his mind. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Charlie slipped from his room carrying the oil lamp his mother had once used during storms. He made his way back to the barn, tools in hand, a spade, a flashlight, and every ounce of courage he could muster. The back of the barn groaned as he peeled a plank loose and slipped through. Dust swirled in the shaft of his light. The inside was a graveyard of forgotten tools, scythes, broken crates, coils of rusted wire. But no animals, no hay, no reason for this building to still exist. Unless it served another purpose. He walked carefully, stepping over rotted boards. His heart hammered so loud he feared it might give him away. He reached the back wall, knelt at the disturbed soil, and began to dig. The earth gave way easily. It smelled of decay, of rot that didn't belong to nature. Charlie gagged but pressed on, the spade cutting deeper. Then he hit wood. He cleared the soil with his hands, revealing the edge of a crate, small, about the size of a child's toy chest. The nails were old and crooked, the wood damp and blackened. He paused, listening. Nothing moved. With trembling fingers, he pried open the lid. Inside were bones. Small. Human. He stared, frozen. A child's skeleton lay curled like it had been buried alive. Cloth remnants clung to the ribs, something lacy, yellowed by time. Clutched in the hand was a rosary, melted in parts as if burned by acid. Charlie reeled back. The flashlight slipped, clattered against the floor. In that moment of darkness, he felt something brush past him, cold and weightless. He scrambled to relight the lamp. When the light returned, the barn looked exactly the same. Except for one thing. Beside the crate, half buried in the dirt, was a small medal. He picked it up. A bronze oval about the size of a coin, engraved with strange markings, Latin maybe. His mother had studied Latin at the seminary before quitting school. Charlie had seen her write similar shapes in her journal. He shoved it into his pocket and closed the crate with shaking hands. Buried it again as best he could. By the time he returned to the house, dawn was breaking. At breakfast, Willis watched him without speaking. His eyes tracked Charlie like a hawk watches a rabbit. Lucille poured coffee and buttered biscuits. Her hand trembled slightly. "You all right, child?" she asked. Charlie nodded, trying to hide his dirt-streaked palms. Willis finally spoke. "You go poking where you don't belong last night?" Charlie stiffened. Willis set his mug down hard enough to crack the handle. "You think you can see something once and unsee it? Think you can dig things up and walk away clean?" Charlie didn't answer. Willis leaned in. "That barn don't forget, and it don't forgive." The rest of the day passed under a shadow. Charlie felt watched, by the trees, the crows, even the wind. That night he sat in his room, medal in one hand, flashlight in the other. He flipped through his mother's journal, seeking something familiar, something that could make sense of the horror he'd unearthed. Then he found it. A page marked with a torn ribbon, a drawing of the exact medal. Beneath it, a single sentence in his mother's handwriting. The first grave was a girl. She never stopped screaming. The journal smelled like cedar and mildew. Its pages curled and yellowed, but the ink held strong. Charlie sat on the floor of his room, back pressed to the wall, lantern flickering at his side. He turned to the page again, the drawing of the medal, the chilling note his mother had written. The first grave was a girl. She never stopped screaming. He traced the lines of the sketch, the same ridged border, the same Latin letters. His fingers tingled with cold despite the summer heat. This wasn't coincidence. His mother had known. She had seen what he now uncovered. Charlie flipped to the journal's first entries. The handwriting was neater, younger, his mother at 15 or 16, full of restlessness and sharp questions. The early pages spoke of loneliness, chores, the weight of silence in the house. But as he moved deeper into the journal, the tone shifted. Her words became clipped, rushed, almost frantic. He talks to the barn now, not to us. Lucille pretends not to hear. I think she's afraid. I know I am. Charlie turned the page. Sometimes I hear children laughing when I pass the barn. Not real laughing, thin and cracked, like old glass. He read on, drawn deeper into her descent. She described finding small bones buried beneath the porch. Finding symbols carved under her bed frame. Symbols she didn't remember making. She wrote about sleepwalking into the fields, waking with mud on her feet, and words in her mouth she couldn't translate. One entry was underlined in red pencil. I think he buried something alive. Charlie's breath caught. He flipped ahead. There were drawings now, rough sketches of the barn from different angles, all marked with strange runes. Beneath one sketch was a single note. The center rots faster. That's where it begins. He closed the journal slowly, staring into the lantern flame. What had his mother found? Why had she left so suddenly? Had she been trying to escape the same thing he'd just unearthed? Downstairs, a creak of floorboards snapped him alert. He stuffed the journal beneath his mattress and blew out the lantern. In the morning, he found Lucille alone in the kitchen. Willis had left early, she said, before the roosters crow, fixing fences again, always fixing things that wouldn't stay fixed. Charlie took his plate and sat in silence, the journal's words burning through his thoughts. Lucille finally spoke. That book, it hers? He froze. How do you know? I watched her write in it, night after night, whispering to herself, hide in it like it was something sacred. Her voice softened. She was always asking questions no one wanted answered. Charlie hesitated. Why did she leave? Lucille looked away. Because she knew if she stayed, she'd be next. Charlie stared. She came to me one night, said she saw a hand in the floor of the barn, said it reached for her, not fast, not angry, just desperate. She cried, Charlie, not like a girl, like a woman who knew something inside her had already been touched. Lucille set down her cup. She said he buried something that still breathed, and it was hungry. The kitchen felt colder now. I think, Lucille whispered, she wanted to save you from it. Later that day, Charlie walked the property with the journal tucked beneath his shirt. He passed the shed, the well, the old stone where the cats never slept. Everything looked the same, but it felt different now. The whole farm was a husk, a shell stretched over something festering underneath. He ended up at the tree line, the edge of the woods. He remembered a line from the journal. The trees know they always lean away from the barn. He looked. They did. That night he lit a candle and returned to the journal. In the final pages his mother had drawn a map, not of the farm but beneath it, tunnels, a root system, a chamber she called the throat. No explanation. Just one final entry. I tried to stop it, but it already knew your name. Charlie sat frozen. It had known him even before he was born. He opened the drawer beside his bed and pulled out the medal. As his fingers closed around it, the room dimmed. Not the light, but the air itself. He heard something shift under the floorboards. A breath, a whisper. A single word, carried in the voice of someone long dead. Charlie. The next morning the barn was silent. No wind, no voices. Just a dead stillness that wrapped around it like a shroud. Charlie stood at the edge of the porch, medal clenched in his fist, journal pressed to his chest. His breath felt heavier today, as if the air thickened the closer he got to the truth. Lucille said nothing when he left the house. She simply looked at him the way one looks at a man marching toward the gallows, with pity, not protest. Charlie returned to the back wall of the barn just after noon, when the light was strongest. He pried the plank free again and slipped inside. His heart pounded against his ribs like fists against a coffin lid. The buried crate was where he left it. But something had changed. There were no footprints around the site, no sign anyone had been there, but the soil looked disturbed, subtly rearranged. He dropped to his knees, breath shallow, dug again. The crate emerged quicker this time. He opened it slowly, prepared for the bones, for the melted rosary. But the box was empty. Charlie stared, disbelief hardening into fear. He searched the surrounding floor, pushing aside hay, splinters, rusted metal. Then just a few feet away, he saw a smear, dark, dry, leading toward the far corner. Blood. He followed the trail to the wall, where a few floorboards had warped upward, as if something beneath had pushed too hard. The rot was worse here. Flies buzzed in lazy circles. Charlie knelt and peeled up the boards. Beneath them, more dirt, wet and black, almost oily. He dug with bare hands until his fingers struck another crate, smaller, older. This time the lid broke apart in his grip. Inside was something wrapped in cloth. He peeled back the fabric and recoiled. A face stared up at him. Desiccated, eyeless, skin drawn tight across bone, but still human. Fair girl, maybe 12, her mouth sewn shut with thick black thread. She wore a dress made of burlap and twine. Around her neck hung another medal. Charlie stumbled backward, bile rising in his throat. He slammed the boards shut and fled the barn, gasping, heart thrashing like a snared animal. Back in the house, he scrubbed his hands raw. He didn't speak to Lucille. Couldn't. He climbed the stairs to his room and collapsed onto the bed. That night the house groaned, not from wind, from something deeper. Charlie jolted awake around midnight. A cold breath danced along the back of his neck. He turned slowly and saw her, the girl. She stood at the foot of his bed, dirt clinging to her feet, her mouth still sewn shut, her eyes empty hollows. The medal glowed faintly on her chest. Charlie couldn't scream, couldn't move. She raised a hand, thin, trembling, and pointed to the floor. Then she vanished. Charlie sat frozen, chest heaving, the room filled with a pressure that didn't lift. He looked to where she had pointed. The floorboard was marked with a cross, small, carved roughly with a blade. He hadn't noticed it before. He dropped to his knees, pried it loose. Inside the hollow he found a bundle wrapped in wax cloth. He opened it carefully. Another journal. Smaller. Older. He turned the first page. The name written there chilled him. Judith Hayes, age 9. He flipped through the entries. The writing was shakier, full of misspellings, but the fear came through clear. She wrote of the voices. Of dreams that weren't dreams. Of waking in the barn with her fingernails filled with dirt and her dress torn. One entry stopped him cold. Papa made me dig a hole. Said it was for a time capsule. Said not to tell Mama. She had drawn a picture beneath it. A child-sized crate. Charlie sat back. It wasn't just madness. It was ritual. His mother had lived it, escaped it, and come back to warn him. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Charlie stuffed the journal beneath his pillow, slid the floorboard back into place. The door opened. Willis stood there, outlined in darkness. "You been digging again?" Charlie didn't answer. Willis stepped into the room. "You think you understand? You think you've seen enough to pass judgment?" He reached into his pocket, pulled something out and dropped it on the floor with a dull thud. The melted rosary. Charlie stared at it. "You woke it up," Willis said, voice low. "You brought it closer." Charlie's lips parted, voice shaking. "What is it?" Willis didn't blink. "It's what's owed." And then he turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. Charlie didn't sleep. He sat upright in bed, staring at the rosary on the floor like it might slither toward him. The room felt thick with something unsaid, and Willis's final words, "It's what's owed," rattled through his chest like nails in a jar. When dawn came, it brought no comfort. Just grey light through the window and the heavy scent of wet wood and rust. He stuffed both journals into a satchel and dressed quickly, hoping to catch Lucille alone. She was in the kitchen, pouring coffee into a tin cup. Her eyes flicked to the bag on his shoulder, then to his face. "You look like you've seen the devil," she said. "I think I have," Charlie replied, voice tight. "And I think he lives in our barn," Lucille exhaled slowly. "So you know now." "I don't know enough. Not yet." She gestured to the table. "Then sit." Charlie did. She pulled a chair across from him, folded her hands. "Your grandpa didn't always carry it inside him. Whatever it is, it didn't come from this land." Charlie opened the journal to one of Judith's entries. She said he made her dig a hole, said it was for a time capsule. Lucille looked away. "I told her not to go with him, told her he was sick. But Judith always tried to protect everyone else before herself." Charlie leaned in. "Why didn't you stop him?" Her eyes met his, sharp, resolute. "Because I was afraid, and because deep down I thought maybe it was already too late." Charlie hesitated. "What is it? What did he bring back from the war?" Lucille's voice lowered. "There's a word he said once before he stopped speaking at night, before he burned the Bible and buried the crucifix under the porch. Mawethu." Charlie frowned. "What does it mean?" "I asked a reverend once. He said it ain't a word from any scripture, not in Hebrew, Greek, or Latin. But he'd heard it whispered in the backwoods, in tongues that ain't human." Charlie's skin crawled. Lucille continued. "Judith believed the land was cursed, but it's not the land. It's the name, the bloodline. Every Willis who dies here feeds it, and everyone born carries it closer." Charlie's breath caught. "You're saying, it's in me?" Lucille nodded, tears welling. "But it can't take you unless you give it permission." Charlie sat back, stunned. "And what if I already did?" Lucille rose slowly, crossed to a drawer, and retrieved something wrapped in velvet. She handed it to him. Inside was a crucifix, twisted and blackened, as if scorched by fire. A thread of ash fell from it as he lifted it. "Judith left that behind when she ran. Said it didn't work anymore." "But maybe it still holds something." Charlie wrapped the crucifix and placed it in his pocket. "What happens if I fight it?" Lucille looked out the window, toward the barn. "Then you'd better dig deeper than your grandfather ever dared, and pray it don't recognize you." Charlie spent the afternoon in the fields, trying to calm his mind with motion. He watched Willis from a distance, silent, stooped, dragging broken fence posts like they weighed nothing. The man didn't look cursed. He looked hollow. That night, Charlie waited until the house was dark before returning to the barn. This time, he brought salt, matches, Judith's journal, and the old crucifix. He entered through the rear again, lantern dimmed. The rot had spread since the last time. The air hung thick with mildew and something sharper, coppery, metallic. Charlie moved to the far corner where he'd found the second crate. The floor was still open, the hole gaping. He dug again, and again he hit something. But this time it wasn't a crate. It was cloth, fabric, and beneath it bone. He cleared the soil faster, hands trembling. It was another child, older than the others, a boy. Jaw open in a scream frozen by time. No rosary this time, only a scrap of parchment clenched in one skeletal fist. Charlie pulled it free. It was stained, almost illegible, but the letters burned into his mind. He said the house would eat us, one by one. He turned to leave and found Willis standing in the open doorway. The lantern flared. "You weren't supposed to find that," Willis said quietly. Charlie stood, fists clenched. "You did this." Willis nodded. "I did what I had to do, for the family." "You buried children." "I buried offerings." Charlie shook his head, voice rising. "You're sick." Willis stepped forward. "You think you're different. You think that thing hasn't already touched you." Charlie stepped back. "Then I'll burn it all." Willis smiled, lips cracked. "Try." And then behind him something moved inside the walls. Charlie didn't remember running. He only knew that when the barn's door slammed shut behind him, his legs were already pumping through the night air, lungs burning. He sprinted across the yard, the crucifix clutched so tightly in his fist it cut into his palm. Behind him the barn groaned, not from wind, from something alive. He reached the house, slammed the door and leaned against it, chest heaving. The shadows inside flickered unnaturally, cast by lamps that hadn't been lit. He backed into the hallway, trying to still his breath, and then stopped. Voices. From upstairs. Soft, broken, and not speaking English. He crept toward the staircase, footsteps muffled by dust and dread. The light above pulsed faintly, revealing long finger-like shadows stretching across the banister. As he placed his foot on the first step, he heard a girl laugh, high-pitched, close, wrong. Charlie bolted back to the kitchen, heart pounding. Lucille stood by the stove. She didn't turn to look at him. Her hand stirred a pot that wasn't there. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Her eyes were glassy, fixed on something only she could see. Charlie touched her shoulder. "Grandma?" She stopped stirring. A beat passed. Then she whispered, "He let it in again." Charlie swallowed. "It's inside the barn." "I heard it. It spoke to me." Lucille blinked, slowly turning toward him. "No. It spoke through you." He staggered back. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. "Your mama wrote this the night before she left. Told me not to open it unless the house went quiet." Charlie took the note with trembling hands, unfolded it. "If it finds his voice, it'll use yours next. Don't let it sing." He looked up, shaking. "What does that mean?" But Lucille was gone. He didn't see her leave. Didn't hear her steps. One moment she was there, the next only the soft creak of the back screen door swinging open in the wind. He ran after her but found nothing outside, only the barn, lit faintly from within. Its door was ajar now. Charlie stepped back, fear scraping his spine raw. The next hour passed in a daze. He locked himself in his room, stuffing the journals under the floorboards, pressing the crucifix against his chest like armor. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. The air wouldn't let him. At midnight, the sound returned. Whispers, wet and crawling, rose from the floor like steam. This time they formed words, his name over and over, until it no longer sounded like his. Then came the scratching. From beneath the floor, from inside the walls, from inside him. He stood and walked toward the window. The barn pulsed with light, as if it breathed. Something moved in the loft, too tall, too thin. Charlie didn't want to go, but he did. He crossed the yard barefoot, not feeling the gravel bite into his soles. The crucifix burned in his palm. The metal around his neck trembled. The barn doors swung wider as he approached. Inside, the lanterns flickered to life one by one, casting orange light on things that shouldn't cast shadows. Charlie stepped inside. The air was syrup. Every breath tasted of ash and old blood. From above came the creaking of wood under weight. He looked up and saw her, his mother. Judith stood in the loft, eyes stitched shut with black thread, arms hanging at her sides like a broken doll. Her mouth moved, but no sound emerged. She began to walk toward the edge. "No," Charlie whispered. "No. You're not real." Judith stepped off the beam, but she didn't fall. She hovered. Then the stitching around her eyes split open, and the thing inside looked at him. Charlie screamed and turned to run, but the doors had vanished. The walls stretched out, warped, rippling like muscle. The barn was no longer wood. It was flesh. He dropped to his knees, gagging, as the floor beneath him pulsed with life. Then a voice filled the space, not Willis's, not his own, something older. "We remember the girl, we remember the dirt. We remember the name." Charlie crawled backward, heart hammering, holding the crucifix before him. The voice laughed. It didn't stop. It filled the barn, the soil, the bones. It filled him. Just as he lost his grip on the crucifix, the laughter cut off. Complete silence, then one word, "Sing," and the barn exploded in screams. When Charlie came to, he was lying in the grass behind the barn. His ears rang, his throat burned. The sky above was cloudless, but everything looked grey. He sat up slowly, his clothes damp with dew and something else. Dark stains clung to the fabric, and the scent of iron filled his nostrils. The barn door was shut again, No light, no voices, only silence. He staggered to his feet and stumbled toward the house. His limbs ached, and the crucifix was gone. The medal still hung cold around his neck. Inside, the house was dark, windows blacked out. The clocks had stopped. Willis sat in his chair by the fireplace, pipe unlit, eyes fixed on nothing. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he spoke. "You saw it." Charlie nodded. Willis's jaw tightened. "It saw you too." Charlie dropped into the chair across from him. "What is it?" Willis didn't answer immediately. He reached into the drawer beside him and pulled out a bundle of folded papers, yellowed and brittle. "Read." Charlie opened the pages carefully. Old letters, all in Willis's handwriting, dated 1864, addresses in Vicksburg. In the margins were notes, coordinates, Latin words, and drawings of symbols Charlie had seen in the barn. One letter stood out. "To whom it may concern, the thing in the hollow demands payment. It feeds not on flesh but on memory, on bloodline. In exchange for breath, I gave it blood. My son was saved, but the debt never ends." Charlie looked up. "Your son?" Willis's eyes were damp now, red-rimmed. "Your great-uncle, born sickly, coffin blood. I was desperate. The war had taken everything but him. So I went where they told me not to go. Deep in the hills where the rocks hum, I found a circle, carved deep into stone. Sat there 3 days, didn't eat, didn't sleep. On the 3rd day, I heard it." Charlie leaned forward, heart pounding. "What did it say?" Willis's voice dropped. "Said it could cure him. Said all it wanted in return was a name." Charlie stared. "A name?" Willis nodded. "Didn't understand then. Thought it meant his, so I gave it. Carved it into the soil with my own hand." He looked away. "Boy lived for 5 years. Strong, healthy. Then one night he vanished, just like that. And 2 days later the neighbor's daughter went missing. They never found her bones." Charlie whispered. "You didn't stop." Willis's hands trembled. "I tried, but it knew my voice. Knew my thoughts. It would scream through the walls, through dreams, through my own son's mouth. Said the name given wasn't enough. Said the bloodline was the only vessel strong enough to hold it." Charlie's skin went cold. "It's why Judith ran." Willis nodded. "She found the ledger, the names, the symbols. She knew what I'd done. She almost burned the barn, but it stopped her. Gave her dreams she couldn't escape. Drove her out before she could speak." Charlie gripped the edges of the letter. "Why didn't she tell me?" "She tried, but it follows written words. That's why she tore pages out, hid them across the farm." Charlie felt sick. "How many?" Willis didn't answer. Instead, he looked directly at Charlie, and for the first time his voice cracked. "You're the last Willis on this land, the final link. If you stay, it finishes its work." Charlie stood, dizzy. "Then I'll leave." Willis shook his head. "You can't. Not anymore. Once it touches your name, it marks your breath." Charlie's voice trembled. "What does it want from me?" Willis whispered. "The same thing it wanted from me. To be born." A silence fell between them, thick and choking. Then outside something moved, a thud against the side of the house, then another. Charlie rushed to the window. Shapes gathered in the yard, dark, crooked, moving like broken puppets. Children, hollow-eyed, mouths sewn shut. Some crawled, others floated inches above the ground. Willis didn't rise. He simply closed his eyes. "It's calling them home." Charlie backed away from the window, blood cold. "How do I stop it?" Willis opened his eyes, shining with grief. "You bury the name, you burn the place, you cut the line before it roots again." Charlie's breath shook. "And if I fail?" Willis looked toward the barn. "Then the scream won't end." Charlie didn't sleep that night. He sat in the hallway outside his room, knees pulled to his chest, watching the door with the cold weight of the truth sinking deeper into him. The barn was no longer just a place. It was a mouth. And now, it had his name. By morning, the bruises started to show. Dark splotches along his ribs beneath his collarbone just above the heart. At first he thought they were from the fall behind the barn. But they didn't hurt. They pulsed, faintly, like tiny heartbeats under the skin. He stood in the bathroom mirror, lifting his shirt, and watched one of the bruises shimmer for a moment. Just a flash, like something beneath had moved. He pressed his hand to it. Ice shot down his spine. He jerked back. It was warm, not fever warm, alive warm. Downstairs, the house creaked more than usual. The wallpaper had begun to peel in long strips, exposing dark rot beneath. Flies gathered in corners that had once been clean. Charlie knew what it meant. The barn's corruption wasn't staying outside anymore. He sat at the kitchen table with Judith's journal, flipping back to a page he'd avoided until now. A sketch, his mother's rendering of their house, overlaid with circles and glyphs. She'd marked the walls, the attic, the crawl space, even the storm cellar. "It's not the barn that's the heart," she had written. "It's the house. The barn is the throat. The house is where it digests." Charlie dropped the journal and stumbled back from the table. The whole house was part of it. He ran to the back porch, tried to catch his breath, but the world outside had shifted. The sky looked too low, pressing down on the trees. The fields were grey, not foggy, just drained, as if the sun couldn't quite shine here anymore. He needed answers, not from his grandfather, from the source. That evening, Charlie climbed into the attic. The boards groaned under his weight. Dust swirled like ash. He pushed boxes aside until he found what he was looking for, his mother's trunk. Locked, with the key taped beneath. Inside, a rosary, 3 candles, a photograph of Judith as a teenager, and a scrap of cloth covered in writing. A ritual. Her handwriting detailed the process. She'd learned it from an old seminary book, one she'd stolen and burned afterward. The rite wasn't meant to cleanse, it was meant to reveal. "If it marked you, it can't lie to you," she wrote. "You are already part of it. Force it to show you its face." Charlie read the instructions twice. He'd need blood, soil, fire, and the metal. He gathered what he needed just after dusk, dug his fingers into the dirt near the barn and filled a jar, sliced his palm gently with a rusted nail, lit the candles in a triangle at the tree line. He recited the words written in the cloth. They felt wrong in his mouth, too old, too round. The air turned electric. Then he buried the metal in the center of the circle and stepped back. Nothing happened at first. Then the ground opened beneath his feet. Not literally, in his mind. He fell, hard, into a memory that wasn't his. He saw Willis, young, blood-soaked, screaming in the hills. He saw a stone altar, slick with something black. He saw Judith, 9 years old, crying beside a small hole in the ground, her hands muddy, her mouth sewn shut, not by thread, but by silence forced upon her. He saw himself, but not quite, a version of Charlie, pale and hollow-eyed, standing in the barn with no shadow behind him. Then the vision snapped. Charlie collapsed, gasping. The circle had gone dark. The soil smoked. He looked at his hands. A mark had formed on his wrist, an open circle drawn in what looked like ash under the skin. It pulsed once, then faded from view. He now knew what it meant. He had been chosen to carry it forward, unless he could break it. He returned to the house, barely walking. Lucille met him at the door. Her face said she'd known what he'd done. "It's inside now," she whispered. "You've invited it too deep." Charlie shook his head. "I didn't invite anything." Lucille looked past him toward the barn. "You didn't have to," she said. "It's family." Charlie didn't eat that night. He barely spoke. Lucille made cornbread and collards like she always did, but the house smelled wrong, like dust and smoke and old vinegar. Something sour had settled into the walls. Even the air tasted like secrets. After dinner, he climbed into the attic again, this time with candles, Judith's cloth, and the black crucifix Willis once buried. The attic felt heavier than before, the shadows thicker. Every beam creaked under his breath. He cleared a space in the center, laid out the triangle, and began to read. The invocation wasn't in Latin or English. It was something else. Something deeper. It didn't sound right, even in his own voice, But that was the point. Judith's instructions were clear. If you want to speak to the dead, don't use the living tongue. The air shifted. The attic darkened, even as the candles flared bright. The silence snapped, and her voice came through. "Charlie." He froze. The voice didn't echo in the room. It echoed in his mind. Soft, familiar. "Close? Mom?" "Yes." Tears burned behind his eyes. He hadn't heard her speak in 3 years, and even now, it didn't feel like memory. It felt like now. "I need to know," he whispered. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You wouldn't have believed me." "I believe now." A pause, then, "It started before me. It started before him. Before the land." Charlie's heart pounded. "Then what is it?" "A hunger," she said. "It uses grief, regret. It needs a story to follow. It finds broken names and it rides them." Charlie felt something move behind him. He didn't look. "What did Grandpa give it?" "Hope," she said. "He thought he could beat death, so he made a deal, not with the devil, with something older." Charlie swallowed. "Is it bound to our blood?" "It's bound to belief. The more we fear it, the more we give." "Then how do I stop it?" "Break the story." He didn't understand. "What story?" "The one it wrote through us, through our family. It only survives because we keep telling it." Charlie clenched his fists. "Then I'll burn it all, the journals, the barn, everything." "No," Judith whispered. "You can't destroy what's inside you. You have to contain it." The attic floor creaked. A new sound joined hers, breathing, deep and wet and close. "I'm scared," he said. "I was too." "What do I do?" She paused. "Find the throat, force it to speak, then shut it forever." Charlie looked around. "How?" Another pause. "Dig." And then the light vanished. The candles blew out, though no wind touched them. The attic went silent again, but something had shifted. He felt it in the air, the way you feel lightning before it strikes. Charlie descended the steps, his hand trembling on the railing. The house was empty. No sign of Lucille, no sign of Willis. He moved through each room, chairs overturned, cabinets open, dirt on the floor. Outside the fields were black, no moon, no stars, just void. He ran to the barn. Its doors were gone. The structure stood open, gaping, a jaw without lips. Inside, the earth had sunk. The center had collapsed inward, forming a spiral trench of twisted soil and broken bones. At the bottom, something pulsed, not light, not shadow, something between. He stepped inside. He felt the mark on his wrist burn. With every step, memories surged. His mother crying in a thunderstorm, his father staring into the fire too long, the way Lucille flinched whenever the floor groaned. Every step was a confession. Every step was a toll. He reached the pit. It breathed. He whispered, "I'm not yours." The voice came from the earth. "You are. You were born from the story." Charlie knelt and touched the soil. It moved. He reached for the bundle in his satchel, Judith's cloth, the medal, the last of her torn journal pages. He placed them into the pit, forming the triangle once more. Then he sliced his palm and let the blood fall into the center. The earth screamed, but not aloud. It screamed through memory. He saw Willis as a boy, led into the cave by soldiers. He saw a preacher slit his own throat to feed the stone. He saw his mother in a chapel, writing feverishly while her eyes wept blood. He saw himself, buried, silent. He opened his mouth and spoke the name, not Mawethu, his own, Charles Hayes. The earth stopped breathing, then the pit closed, not violently, like a wound healing. The barn sighed, and the light went out. The silence after the ritual was unnatural. It wasn't peace. It was pause, like breath held before a scream. Charlie left the barn in a trance. The air outside felt thinner. The wind had stopped. No insects, no birds. Only the faint hum beneath his feet, like the land itself whispered secrets it couldn't contain. He entered the house expecting to find Lucille or Willis. He found neither. The rooms were hollow. Their absence echoed louder than footsteps. Doors stood open. Chairs overturned. The scent of smoke clung to the curtains. Charlie moved to the parlor and saw what had been left behind. The ledger. Old. Bound in cracked leather. Sitting squarely in the middle of the table like it had been waiting for him. He opened it slowly. Inside were names. Hundreds. Generations. Each name was followed by a date and a symbol. Some symbols he recognized from the barn floor. Others chilled him more. Beside his mother's name, a circle pierced by a single nail. Her death was marked not by fire, but by sacrifice. Beside his name, an open circle. No date, just a line. Unfinished. Charlie closed the book. He knew now what he had to do. Burning the barn wasn't enough. Not while its roots still pulsed through the fields, the woods, the walls of the house. It wasn't a structure, it was a system. A body with pieces buried like tumors. He had to find them all. The first was easy. Behind the barn, where he'd uncovered the first crate, he dug again, this time deeper. He uncovered 4 small bones wrapped in linen, tied with red thread. He didn't flinch. He placed them in the satchel, along with the cloth and medal. He returned to the house and checked Judith's journals again. She'd marked 5 places with small crosses. Each one hid something. Each one screamed when he unearthed it. Behind the smokehouse, a skull no bigger than his palm, jaw unhinged in terror. Beneath the old rocking chair, a bundle of hair and teeth tied with twine. Near the well, an infant's rib cage inside a rusted tin lunchbox. Under his own bed, a hand, mummified, still wearing a ring. Every object he dug up made him colder, not from fear. From something leaving him. He couldn't cry, couldn't tremble. He was becoming hollow, and he knew that was part of it. But he pressed on. Each item went into a wheelbarrow lined with salt and soaked cloth. He wheeled it toward the edge of the field, farthest from the barn where Judith's map showed a final circle. He dug until sunset. There, beneath roots twisted like knots, he found it. The book. Not the ledger, a grimorio, bound in skin, stamped with the same mark as his wrist. He opened it, and the pages breathed, not literally, but close. Inside he found instructions, for a final ritual, not to banish, to seal. The book said nothing of fire or exorcism. It spoke of containment, of burying the hunger in a vessel it couldn't escape, one born into the bloodline. Charlie closed the book, and for the first time he didn't hesitate. He knew what it meant. And still he rolled the wheelbarrow back to the barn. The ground beneath the structure had begun to shift. Cracks spidered through the earth. Flies swarmed in geometric patterns above the roof. The air throbbed with pressure. He dumped the contents of the wheelbarrow into the pit. Bone, flesh, memory. Then carefully he placed the book on top. He took a match, lit the cloth. The fire didn't roar. It folded inward, like breath being drawn. The pit pulled the flame in, swallowed it. Charlie stepped back. Then, from the barn walls, came whispers. Not one voice. Dozens. The names from the ledger, said aloud, as if called home. He looked behind him. Lucille stood there, pale and gaunt, her eyes filled with tears. "You found them," she said. Charlie nodded. She reached out, touched his wrist. The mark flared, bright and hot, then faded again. "You don't have long," she whispered. He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. The seal would hold, but only if he stayed, only if it stayed with him. Lucille saw it in his eyes. "You'll do it anyway." Charlie looked at the barn one last time. "I already did." Night came fast. The sky turned black without ceremony, and the wind returned, not gentle but sharp, like it carried teeth. Charlie stood alone in the yard, staring at the barn as it pulsed faintly with light from deep within. He felt the pull again, the hum in his bones, the soft whisper beneath thought. The seal hadn't been enough, not yet. Willis appeared at the edge of the field. He moved differently now, straighter, faster, like something inside him had been replaced. His eyes gleamed in the dark, catching no reflection. Charlie didn't speak. Willis did. "You shouldn't have touched the book." Charlie held his ground. "You left it for me." No, Willis said. It left itself. You were just the next mouth. Charlie's fists tightened. I'm not like you. Willis laughed, not from joy, from emptiness. You are me. I've seen your blood boil in dreams. You speak its name now without fear. I speak my own, Charlie said. Willis stepped closer. Then why haven't you left? Charlie didn't answer. Because he couldn't, because the thing in the barn wouldn't let him. Willis extended his hand. You can still stop this, let it in, let it finish, end the hunger. Charlie stared at the outstretched palm. The flesh was cracked. Symbols burned across his skin, still smouldering. His grandfather was no longer a man. He was a vessel. I'd rather burn, Charlie whispered. Willis tilted his head. So be it. The ground trembled. From the barn, the doors burst open. Smoke poured out thick and black, coiling like a serpent into the sky. The earth cracked, the wind howled, shapes emerged. Children with stitched mouths, men with no eyes, women whose faces had been erased. They poured from the barn like shadows made flesh, crawling across the field, their bodies twitching to the rhythm of something not born in this world. Charlie turned and ran, not from them but toward the house. He needed the last piece, the object Judith had hidden. Her journal had mentioned it once. In the chimney, behind the soot, lies what it fears most. He threw open the hearth, reached past the ashes and found it. A mirror. Small. Circular. The frame carved with runes. He held it up. The surface didn't reflect him. It reflected the barn. And it was burning, but not outside, inside. He ran back out, holding the mirror before him like a shield. Willis stood between him and the barn now, mouth stretched into a grin too wide for his face. His eyes glowed like coals. You can't stop it, he said. It's fed too long, it's too deep. Charlie raised the mirror, and Willis screamed, not in pain, but in loss. His body twisted, bones snapping. He fell to his knees, clutching his skull, shrieking words that split the air. Behind him the creatures shriveled. The barn's pulse flickered. Charlie took another step. The mirror trembled in his grip. The symbols on the frame lit up, one by one, as if responding to the barn's breath. The wind howled louder. Then the ground split open. A fissure tore through the earth from the barn to the house, swallowing fence posts and trees in its path. Light poured from below, red, hot, writhing. Charlie didn't move. From within the chasm, a voice rose. You bore my name. You fed me. You dug your own grave. Charlie stepped to the edge. I bury it now. The wind died. Silence returned. Then the voice screamed, not through the air but through every surface, every bone, every word ever spoken on that land. Charlie dropped to his knees, holding the mirror over the pit. It began to crack. One fracture. Two. He whispered, I give it back to the dirt, and dropped it in. The moment it shattered, the earth roared. The barn ignited. Flames poured from every seam. And Willis, still screaming, vanished into the smoke. The flames devoured the barn, climbing fast, too fast, licking at the sky like they wanted to erase the stars. Smoke churned upward, thick and black, pulsing with every scream that rose from the depths. But nothing around the barn caught fire, not the grass, not the fence. The fire burned in place, as if it had been waiting for permission. Charlie stood frozen at the edge of the fissure, the heat licking his skin, his breath shallow. Then it came. Not through the door, not through the pit. From within the fire itself, a figure walked forward, half man, half something else. Its skin peeled back in strips, revealing layers of bone, root, and ash. The shape shifted with each step. Sometimes Grandpa Willis, sometimes Judith, sometimes Charlie himself. Its face bled and reformed in slow pulses, never holding one identity for long. It stopped in front of him and spoke. You opened the story. Charlie stared into its eyes, deep shifting wells of red and black. I ended it. The thing smiled, wide and wet. You gave it an ending. But not silence. Charlie felt the heat closing in, pressing on his ribs, his skull, his memory. "You were never a curse," he said. The thing blinked. "You were an echo, passed down, because no one ever told the truth." The figure cocked its head. "What truth?" "That we made you. Out of fear, out of shame, out of all the things we buried instead of facing." It stepped closer. "I am your inheritance." "No," Charlie whispered. "You're our burden." He stepped forward, into the heat, into the crackling breath of the thing that had haunted his blood for generations. The fire curled around his legs, his hands, but it didn't consume him. It recognized him. He reached for the medal still around his neck, held it up. "You know my name, but you don't own it." The figure flinched. "I claim it," Charlie said. "I end it." He pressed the medal to his chest. The burn was immediate. Pure white light poured from the wound, blasting through the figure before him. It howled, reeling backward, its many faces tearing apart, unraveling into ash. But still it stood. Still it grinned. "You can burn the story," it whispered, "but you can't erase memory." Charlie fell to his knees. The fire pressed closer now, hotter, angrier. The earth shook. From the fissure, dozens of arms reached skyward, skeletal, screaming, grasping for breath. The names, the ancestors, the weight. He couldn't hold it all. He screamed. And then a hand took his. Soft, small, Judith. She stood beside him, her eyes no longer sown, her skin glowing faintly in the inferno. She whispered, "Let it fall." He looked at her. "Let what fall?" "The name." Charlie rose, breath ragged, and shouted into the fire. "I give back the name. I bury the blood. Let the ground eat what it was never meant to carry." The earth groaned. The arms withdrew. The fissure closed slowly, inch by inch, sealing the mouth that had fed for so long. The figure cried out one last time, and this time it sounded like nothing human. Then it was gone. Charlie stood alone in the flames. They licked his body, but they didn't burn. They wrapped around him like wind, like water, like memory unbound. The barn collapsed inward, a perfect implosion of soot and smoke, and the night went still. No whispers, no heat, no hunger, just stars, just breath. Charlie stepped from the ashes. The metal melted into his chest. The mark on his wrist faded into skin. Lucille waited for him at the porch, eyes full of everything she could never say. He walked to her, slowly. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. He had done what no Willis before him could. He hadn't fed it, he hadn't run from it, he had named it, and then let it die. The barn was gone. In its place stood a patch of scorched soil, black and still, marked only by the hollow where fire had swallowed memory. Nothing smoldered. No embers lingered. The silence that followed was not peace, but vacancy. The kind of quiet that comes only after something ancient has left. Charlie walked across the field barefoot, his steps slow, deliberate. Every blade of grass he crossed bent without resistance. Even the wind avoided the spot where the barn once stood. Lucille watched from the porch, hands clasped tightly at her waist. "You came back," she said softly. Charlie nodded. "It's over." Her eyes searched his face. "Not for you." He looked down at his chest. The metal had fused to his skin in the fire, now a faded outline beneath his collarbone. The mark on his wrist had disappeared, but he could still feel it pulsing just under the surface, like an echo in his veins. "You burned it," Lucille said, "but the land remembers." "I know." They stood in silence for a long time, the sun slowly bleeding its last light across the fields. That night, Charlie didn't sleep in the house. He stayed outside by the ashes, watching the stars. He didn't dream. There was nothing left to dream about. By morning, Lucille had packed a satchel with food and water. "You won't find comfort here," she said. "But maybe you'll find quiet." Charlie nodded. There was nothing left for him on that land. He had buried the story. But the story had also buried him. He walked down the same dirt road he'd arrived on weeks before. Different feet, different soul. The sun rose behind him, casting a long shadow that didn't quite match his shape. He didn't look back. Lucille stood on the porch until he was gone, then walked slowly to the edge of the field. She knelt beside the blackened soil and planted something, a small white cross carved from old cedar. It bore no name, because the name was finished. Weeks passed, rain returned, birds came back, the wind softened, and the land began to heal. The fields greened again, the trees stood straighter, and for the first time in 100 years the house did not creak at night. No whispers, no dreams. Only silence, but even silence leaves traces. One morning a local boy wandered too far from town, chasing frogs down by the old creek bed. He found the burned patch of land and the cross planted in its center. He told his mother about it, said the ground made his feet buzz when he stepped on it. The mother laughed it off, but later that week, the boy started drawing symbols in the dirt. He didn't know what they meant, but they looked like stories, and sometimes when the wind came through the trees, he said he heard a girl laughing, soft, broken, and old. Years passed, and the legend of the Willis farm faded like old paint beneath the Delta sun. People stopped talking about the fire, about the boy who left, about the strange shapes that had once haunted the fields. Cotton grew again where the barn once stood. Children walked the road without fear. The cross in the field grew weathered, its edges softened by rain and time. But stories have roots deeper than memory. One autumn, a team of surveyors came to map the land for a new road. They noticed the odd patch of earth, still scorched, still refusing to grow. Curiosity led them to dig. Just a few feet down they found bones, bundled tight with cloth and twine, not animal, not recent. Some bones were tiny, others brittle as dried reeds. There were trinkets, medals melted into unrecognizable shapes, pieces of what might have been a rosary, fragments of a child's dress, and a single waterlogged book whose cover had been half-eaten by soil. The town buzzed with rumors. The old folks whispered that the past was never gone. It just waited silent for someone to dig too deep. Some claimed they heard voices on the wind when they passed the field at dusk, the faint echo of children's laughter laced with something darker. Others said the land was cursed and urged the workers to leave well enough alone, but most people forgot. Time moved on. One spring, a young professor named Eleanor Brown arrived from Memphis to catalog the unearthed relics for the county. She spent weeks piecing together the story. A family marked by tragedy, a fire that destroyed a barn, names erased from records. The journal she salvaged was written in two hands, a girl's and later a young man's. Both spoke of dreams that bled into waking, of a barn that whispered, of a name that had to be buried. Eleanor grew obsessed. She traced the story backward, searching birth records, old letters, fragments of prayer books. She followed the trail all the way to Chicago, where she found one last letter, Judith Hayes writing to her son, warning him to never let the earth know your name. Eleanor returned to the Delta changed. She told no one what she'd learned. But at night she dreamed of a barn that breathed, of hands reaching up through the soil, of a boy standing alone in a field, burying a story so deep no one could ever find it. But stories never stay buried. The land changed hands. The farm became overgrown again. No crops took root where the ashes lay. Locals said the ground was sour. A few brave souls tried to build on it. Barns, sheds, even a small school. Nothing lasted. Nails rusted overnight. Paint peeled. Wood rotted faster than it should. Some nights, travelers lost on the road would wake to the sound of singing, soft and broken, like the wind through a cracked door. They said it was the voice of a child, or maybe the echo of something older, still hungry, still waiting for a name. But Charlie Hayes never returned. His life became a quiet rumor, letters with no address, postcards with no signature. Some said he built a house on high ground far from any barn, never speaking of what he'd seen. Others believed he wandered forever, carrying a story too heavy to set down. The cross in the field remained, a mute witness. The only marker for all the things buried and unburied, for the voices that linger in root and bone. And so the land rested. Not cleansed, not cursed, simply left alone. But if you stand there at sunset and listen closely, you might hear the wind shift. You might hear a voice, thin and old as dust, whisper from the ground, "We remember the name, and some things once buried never stop reaching up." If you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe for more true tales and haunted histories. And if you want to keep going down the rabbit hole, click the video on your screen for another story buried by time, because some secrets refuse to stay silent.